Okay, so we're now recording. Phew. Oh my goodness. Um, yes. So, yeah, very informal. And I really hope you find this helpful. So, to tell you a little bit about me and my background, my name is Pippa. I'm a psychology graduate. I attended the University of York in 2013. I'm originally from Sheffield, but I moved to York for uni, and I loved it so much that I've been here ever since. And yeah, like I say, I studied psychology, and I actually acquired my chronic illness halfway through my undergraduate degree. So great time in there. And like many people with a long-term health condition, I found myself in this really in-betweeny grey area. So with support and adjustments, I could continue studying for my degree, but I really had no idea as to what would come afterwards in terms of employment, whether I would be able to work, how to find something that's suitable for me. And yeah, I call myself an in-betweener because I knew that I was capable of working in some capacity, but I knew that I was definitely not well enough to work full-time hours, to commute to an office, to be around other people all the time. And I really struggled with finding something that was going to work for me and my condition over the longer term, whilst avoiding symptoms and burning myself out. And I should probably say at this point as well that my condition is a neurological chronic illness called ME, which stands for myalgic encephalomyelitis. In a nutshell, it has some really fun symptoms like debilitating fatigue, chronic pain, cognitive symptoms like brain fog, short-term memory loss, something called post-exertional malaise, which is where you feel the impact of doing something at a much later date, and it's kind of like payback for doing that thing. Yeah, so it's a really fun time. It makes day-to-day living quite eventful. So basically what I wanted to reiterate before we start is that I know the struggle of finding inclusive employment opportunities. I know firsthand how frustrating and how disheartening it can be. And I also know how difficult it can be when the advice that's out there is it's well-intentioned, but it's sometimes not always the most useful. So what I hope to do with this event today is share actually useful information where you think I can take something away from that. So yeah, I will keep an eye on the chat for now, just to make sure that everything's working as it should be. And like I say, please feel free to ask questions as we go along, and we will answer them at the end. If there's anything you want to talk more about as well, we can do that. But yeah, I think if everyone's happy, time for the next technological challenge. Let's see if I can share the screen without destroying everything. Right. Share screen. Desktop. And I want to make sure that you can all see Charlotte still. So hopefully that's all okay. If for any reason you're having issues with this, please turn on your microphone and just say, shut up a minute, Pippa, let's take care of it, because I want to make sure everyone can access this. But yeah, okay. And if you see me glancing down at my notes occasionally, please forgive me, because like I say, the brain fog struggle is real. Yeah, okay. So, how to find employment as a chronically ill or disabled young person. That's another thing to say as well. I'm kind of targeting this information specifically for the younger generations. I hope that there's something that everyone can take away from this, but yeah, specifically thinking about people who might be coming out of education or who are around that same age. I hope this is helpful. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is finding job roles to apply for. So thinking about pursuing work in a very typical sense, where you're searching through jobs and applying through a standardized system. I'm also going to send this slideshow around afterwards. I'm going to make sure that you all have access to it, because there's loads of links and loads of blog posts and stuff in there that I hope you'll find helpful. And that is basically the first point on this slide, is that I have a blog post. I should say as well, I'm a blogger. I have a blog at Life of Pippa. Yeah, there's a massive list of where to find accessible employment opportunities in that blog post. There are things like Indeed, Guardian Jobs. And whilst these are very typical job searches that are very much catering for non-disabled people, there are things you can do to filter those job searches to make them more inclusive for you. So you really have to think about the keywords you're using in your search. So things like work from home, remote work, part-time, flexible hours. And I mean, given the circumstances we're living in at the moment, I don't think working from home is going to be as big of a barrier as it was in the past, to say the least. There are also other schemes and mentoring out there, which are specifically designed for disabled people. So we have BBC Extend Hub, For Talent, the Prince's Trust, who run various schemes, particularly related to enterprise and business. The charity Scope have a support to work programme. They have various different routes into helping people to secure paid employment. And then the other thing I wanted to say on this point is to really utilise charities who are doing work in this sector. So one of those charities is Astrid, and I'm going to tell you more about them a little bit later on. But in a nutshell, they match people with long-term conditions with inclusive employment opportunities. So in that sense, if you're kind of going down the traditional routes for finding a job, I think it's important to know that whilst many of the traditional routes and job searching things where you can browse through what's available online and then click through and do your application form, it does take some trawling sometimes, but there are ways of finding things that might be more suitable for you and your circumstances, whatever they may be. And yeah, basically in that blog post, which I will send around afterwards, there is just a massive list of like different websites you can search through, different schemes, different mentoring. There's even things like I'm trying to think what it's called. There's a site called Flex Jobs, and there's sites like People Per Hour. So even if you're not up to regular employment at the minute, even if you're just looking for like ad hoc work to either enhance what you're doing at the minute or just to test the waters and see how you'd cope with paid work, those two, Flex Jobs and People Per Hour, are really good for finding like little odd jobs, that many of which can be done remotely, and they're less of a commitment than typical employment, I suppose. I think that's everything I wanted to say about that. Yeah, so many of these roles that we've touched on here will be very like established and like rigorous schemes. As you can imagine, there'll be an established job role, but you might need something that's a bit more tailored for your own circumstances, and that was the position that I was in. And that's why what I want to talk about next is how to create your own opportunities. Next slide. Okay, so the reason I really wanted to talk about this, in addition to tips for looking for the jobs that are already out there, is that something I don't think we as disabled and chronically ill people necessarily know is that we have the power to actually go out there and create our own opportunities. And it's definitely not always easy, and it definitely doesn't always come off, but I just think it's really important that if you know you have something to offer, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you approaching people and saying, hey, you should hire me. That this is like, look, I can do all of these things for you. And I don't mind telling you, this is how I landed the role I'm in at the moment. So I'm in a charity job at the moment, and that didn't come about through a traditional application. It came about as a result of networking and building up a relationship with a charity and the people within it, and having a conversation about what they could benefit from and how I might be able to help them. And like I say, it definitely doesn't always come off, and don't get me wrong, I've had my fair share of no's as well as yeses. Even these days with my freelance work, I still get just as many no's as I do yeses. But you can create your own opportunity, and I'm going to talk a little bit about ways that you might be able to do that. So, yeah, you have the power to design and pitch a job role which works for you. I think that's really important to say. And if you're in that situation and you perhaps don't know where to start, I'm sure you'll have an idea in your mind of the kind of work that you want to get into, whether that's a very specific job role or even just the sector that you're hoping to go into. And if you're in this position, I think it's really important to think in advance about any reasonable adjustments that you might need in pursuing paid work. So in non-pandemic times, these might be things like working from home, It might be that there are flexible hours that you might benefit from, whether that's just slightly reduced hours so you're not working full time, or maybe it's you want to say that you're not as well in the morning, so you'd prefer to work more hours in the afternoon. And yeah, I'm just going to click on the chat to make sure that we're not having any issues with sharing. Just check this till there. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, this is, oh, come back. Yeah, this has been recorded, don't worry. Yeah, so I think it's really important before you start pitching to anybody to really have a clear idea in your head of what kind of work you want to get into and the things you need to thrive in that line of work. So what you want to do and the reasonable adjustments that will help you to do it. Once you've got that straight in your head, the next step is to think about the organisations or the businesses or the charities or the enterprises which you think you can add value to. And it can be really helpful to go away and make a list of all of the different assets that you could offer their organisation. So think about each one in turn. Like, it's really important to look at each one individually, then try and address them as a whole, and think about what they specifically might benefit from and why you're specifically in a position to help them with that thing. So in my own case, I joined a charity that was doing brilliant work, but didn't at that point have a very didn't have a thriving online presence. And because my skills are in things like content creation and social media, I knew that I genuinely could look at the brilliant work they were doing and make sure that translated online. And that was basically my way in. So really think about what you can offer and why they need it. And why it should be you as well, why it's you specifically they need. And again, in my own case, and we're going to talk about this more later, my chronic illness was an asset in this way. So once we've got to that stage, the next thing to do is find a point of contact and pitch to them. So I think, and I cannot emphasize this enough, when you're in any kind of networking, whether it's related to jobs or projects or anything, I think it's really, really important to find a personal contact. So you're looking for a name of an individual, rather than like if a business or charity has a contact page and you can see it's like a general inquiries email address or a contact form, because often you can put all your time and energy into putting a message through to them in that way, and so many times it'll just get lost or it'll get passed on to the wrong person. So yeah, it's really important to find a point of contact. You might be able to do that through the company's website, or LinkedIn is actually really helpful in this sense. You can do some real professional stalking on LinkedIn. It's a great time. And yeah, so you're look for the person who's most specifically related to the concept that you're pitching. So that might be, depending on the size of the company, it might be like a PR manager if you're interested in social media. It might be a finance person if you're interested in kind of like the maybe the accountancy side of things. So give some thought as to that. And I think it's time put into the right, finding the right person to contact is time well spent. So don't be afraid to spend time on that. Then you're going to pitch them. You're going to initiate that conversation and you're going to tell them all the things that we've discussed here. And yeah, that is a whole other conversation for another time. There are so many intricacies with that, but yeah, basically in a nutshell, you're basically going to tell them why you are equipped to offer them something that they can benefit from. And waiting for a response when that happens can be painful, and getting a no can also be very painful. And believe me, I've been through that myself. But as I've said here, even if it's a no this time, from you reaching out to them, you've put your name in your head. They know who you are now. You might have planted the seed of an idea for something that will come off in the future. And again, that is something I've experienced myself, where I've gone to an organisation and pitched something and had a no, but they've come back to me at a later date because they remember that I did that, and some work has come out of that at a later date. So don't fret even if it's a no this time, because you never know what's going to happen in the future. And just because we touched on networking there, I thought I would put this in here. I do have, please don't feel like this is a sales pitch, because that's really not what this event is, but I do have an ebook online. It's called How to Network Online. And it basically goes into more detail about how to find contacts and how to pitch them and the sort of language you should use and how to find the right person. It's usually $2.99, but if you go to my blog and you use the code YDW, York Disability Week, it'll take the price down to $1.99. So that's there, just in case anyone does happen to be interested. Oh, goodness me, my computer is talking to me. Okay, that's better. So what we've talked about there is creating your own opportunities, and why that can be really valuable, even if it's something that you've not considered before. That can actually be a really unique route into employment, and that can be a way of creating a role and opportunities that are particularly suitable for your disability or chronic illness. But something that I think is really important, whether you're applying for a job in the typical sense, like we talked about first off, like just going down the traditional route of employment, or you're trying to create your own opportunities, I think sometimes what we as disabled and chronically ill people have to do is go the extra mile in demonstrating the skills we have to offer. And in these times more than any other, I think it's really important that we can do this online and we're able to really show people what we can do and why we are worthy of employment. So yeah, what I want to talk about here is demonstrating your skills online, and yeah, how you can demonstrate what you can do. So in this area, again, when you've thought about the sector and the line of work that you want to go into, it can be really valuable to make a list of the specific skills which you think are most desirable in the area that you want to go into. And a lot of these will be transferable skills that are suitable for many different roles, like, I don't know, communication, showing an initiative, all those buzzwords like that. But yeah, spend some time thinking about those skills, make a list of them all, and then we're going to think about how you can easily demonstrate them online in ways that other people will easily be able to see them and get a measure of what you can do. So to give you a few examples of that, various things to consider, and there are ways of tweaking all of these things to make them relevant for the sector you're interested in. So there are things like blogs, if you're a writer, portfolios, if you're studying creative subjects, it can be a really good way of demonstrating your work online. If you're in a subject where you think, oh, I don't know how I could possibly do this online, having a website and having testimonials from people you've worked with in the past can be a really good way of kind of providing references in a way without people having to go and seek references once you've applied for a job. And the other thing to say on that one as well is never be afraid to ask for testimonials from people you've worked with, whether that's in an employed capacity or a voluntary capacity or anything like that. There's absolutely no harm in going back to people you've worked with and asking if they can provide a few words about how they found working with you, because hearing positives about somebody from somebody else is such a leg up when it comes to employment, I can't even tell you. But besides that, there are also videos, YouTube, like, don't knock it, like, YouTube isn't just for influencers. YouTube can be a really unique way of demonstrating your skills in a specific area. Again, if you don't feel like your specific line of work fits in with any of these things, it might be that you can make informative videos about a subject you're interested in and share them online. Similarly with podcasts, it might be that you can either create a podcast or reach out to people who have podcasts and ask if they'd be willing to accept guests. And there are so many podcasts these days. I think there are podcasts related to every industry that's out there at the minute. And they have such a big audiences too, which is really cool. Yeah, so basically it's all about creating these online resources that demonstrate what you can do. And in a way, going about that without somebody asking you or telling you to, I think really shows initiative and creativity as well. So again, those key buzzwords there, which employers always like to look for. And yeah, so like everybody who applies for a job, everybody's going to have a CV and everybody's going to be able to write a cover letter. But especially in this kind of online world that we're living in the moment, and especially as a disabled or a chronically ill person, I think having that like additional thing that really shows off your talents might be what sets you apart from competitors. And that might be the thing that makes employers remember you. Like, they might have loads of applicants for a specific job, but they might be like, oh, that's the person who did that really cool podcast, or they did that video, and it sticks in your mind. And yeah, again, that is something that has worked for me in the past. I cannot recommend it strongly enough, especially because creating resources online has never been easier. You don't have to put money into it. All you need to do is have some time and have a few creative ideas, and that can really set you apart, I've found. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say about that one. I'm just going to do a time check because I don't want to waffle on too much. Okay, we're doing okay. Okay, so I think the next thing, oh goodness, it's talking to me again. There we go. So something else I specifically wanted to mention in this session today is disclosing your disability, because I think we can all relate to the kind of dilemma as to whether or not to disclose your disability or your chronic illness on job applications, even things like work experience applications and internships. Yeah, because there are pros and cons with doing it, and I think it's such a personal decision, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer when it comes to disclosing your disability. But what I would say is that it's okay to feel insecure about it, because disclosing your disability can lead to conversations about it, and initiating those conversations can feel difficult, especially when you know you're competing against other people. And yeah, I think attitudes are changing on the part of employers, but I can completely understand the apprehension that someone might feel about disclosing their disability. And it's really important to say that you are never obliged to disclose your disability or your health condition. But what I've found actually is that doing so can be a really positive experience, and it can be something that can be immensely helpful. So when I've disclosed chronic illness in the past, it has been a way of opening up discussions about any reasonable adjustments I need if I were to go on to secure the role or the work. How the role might be adapted, not only to make it safe and suitable for me, but also to like just enhance what I can offer. Because the other thing with disclosing your disability is that without going into that very sort of typical like disability stereotype, living life with a fluctuating chronic illness, I think, is such an easy way of demonstrating your skills to employers, because so many of the skills that they desire in potential employees, you've been able to demonstrate just by dealing with all the challenges that come with chronic illness. So resilience, problem solving is the one I always talk about. Yeah, there are so many different things where it, like, your illness or your disability is relevant, and it can really help you to demonstrate just how much you're worth. And yeah, just that last point as well, like your unique lived experiences, they can actually be a really huge asset in the workplace. And a lot of people think that if your role that you're interested in or your sector that you're interested in isn't specifically related to disability or charity work or anything like that, they think that mentioning these things might not necessarily be relevant. But in kind of progressive organizations and like forward-thinking organizations, like, people know that a diverse workforce makes organizations a lot more impactful and a lot stronger. Like, there are so many studies that show that having a diverse workforce really helps with creativity and decision-making processes. So I'm tempted to say, and I completely appreciate that this really depends on the individual and the situation, but I'm tempted to say, like, don't be worried about disclosing your disability, because I think the tide is changing. And I think people are starting to realise that having disabled and chronically ill workers as part of their team is a hugely positive thing. And rightly, they're not seeing it as a negative thing, for which we can all be grateful. Thank goodness people have finally realised that. Yeah, yeah, and I've basically said here, like, if you have confidence in your abilities and you're able to express your skills with conviction, like, if you have the self-belief to, like, know that you have something to offer, the best employers out there will recognise just how much you have to bring to the table. Yeah, and if you take one thing away from this whole thing today, I hope you know just how much you have to offer, because again, people with disabilities and chronic illnesses, we're so often made to feel like an afterthought, and that is a huge problem in the world we live in, that like it can be easy to forget that we have all of these skills and all of these talents, and just because the world hasn't quite woken up to them yet, it doesn't mean that they're not there. It just means that sometimes we have to be a little bit more proactive in going out there and demonstrating and showing people like, this is who I am and this is what I can do. So it can take a little bit more energy and effort to get to a stage where people do see us on an equal playing field with everybody else. And whilst I'm not saying that that's right, and in a truly equal society that wouldn't be the case, I think putting that time and effort in can be the way forward and can be the game changer. So just really thinking about your worth and the things you have to offer, and thinking about how you can demonstrate them online, and basically how you can just really get into the face of employers as well. Yeah, I do think all of these things are worth doing, and they're worth putting the time and energy in, because as I said, they have been a game changer for me personally. So yeah, I just really hope that you like know and you remember that you have something to offer, because you do. Like, I really, really believe that we all have so many valuable skills to offer. I think I've just accidentally said everything that's on here already. Got a bit carried away. Yeah, so just remember, you have skills and talents that you can bring to the table. You should definitely believe in yourself and always know your worth. Even if it feels a little bit uncomfortable at first, like if you really take the time to learn what your strengths are and your skills are and really tell yourself that you can do them, it will be much easier to approach other people and tell them with conviction what you have to offer, and employers will internalize that as well. This is a big one, which it took me a while to learn. You're a subject expert in your own lived experiences, and you never know when that's going to come in helpful. Like, nobody knows better than you your lived experiences as a disabled person, and that can be relevant whether or not you're going into a disability related role or not. Yes, there will always be barriers and there are always going to be setbacks, but again, it's important to remember that these aren't a reflection on your capabilities or your potential. Even if you do really put yourself out there and you get a no, I know that can be so difficult and it can be so disheartening, but having that no isn't a reflection on your value, and it doesn't mean that there won't be yeses in the future. And again, it did take me a while to learn that, but you do have to just keep persevering. I know it's difficult, but trust me, it gets easier. And yeah, the last one is something that's really important to me. And I really don't think you should have to compromise on your ambitions just because of your health condition. I fully recognize that the world isn't equipped to like accommodate a fully inclusive workforce yet. And trust me, I'm working on it. But I think it's all about learning to take little risks and growing more comfortable with that. And basically just learning how to get a little bit creative instead. I think that's kind of my take-home point from this, really. Like, not to be afraid to kind of do something that perhaps might seem a little bit out of the ordinary, but that's going to make you stand out. And I think that is my last slide. Oh, hang on, no, there's one more. Yeah, there's one more. I know what I'm doing. So I'm going to close this slideshow in a sec. We should hopefully have plenty of, yeah, we've still got plenty of time. So I hope that was helpful. And as I said, I will find a way of getting this slideshow out to you, because on the slide after this one, there are loads of different links you might find useful as well. But I will preemptively say thank you for listening. And what we'll do now is questions and answers. So I'm going to have a look at the chat box. So if there's anything in here that you would like to talk about more, if you have any specific questions about employment and how it relates to chronic illness and disability, please ask away. No question is a silly question. Because this is being recorded, I won't say your name when I answer any questions or comments, but I can see them all. You can find me at Life of Pippa if you want, that's not important. And there are the useful resources which I'll send around afterwards. So I'm going to close that now, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to have a drink because,
Pippa?
Yeah.
I've been looking at the questions that have come in. Would it be useful to you if I just tried to group them a little bit?
Oh yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay. This is Marilyn, people from the Human Rights City Network who support York Disability Week. So there's one group of questions which is about, when do you disclose if you're going to? Should it be when you're applying, prior to interview, after the interview? And the second one, which is, how do you bring up reasonable adjustments if you haven't disclosed?
Yeah, they're two really good questions. I think it's up to the individual when you feel most comfortable disclosing. So it might be, I know that a lot of people do it in the cover letter stage. So when they're telling employers a little bit more about them, you might find that it comes up quite naturally in the conversation. If not, it can, I mean, you can bring it up during the interview. I can imagine that might feel a little bit more uncomfortable if you've not mentioned it beforehand, and an interviewer won't necessarily know to ask you about that if you haven't disclosed it beforehand. I think if it were me, I'd be tempted to do it in my CV or my cover letter, but if you did want to do it at a later stage, it might be worth waiting until you've had the job offer, and then when you're kind of in that negotiation stage where you're deciding whether or not to accept it, it can be worth going back to the employer and saying, I'm really interested. Do you have some time where we can have a conversation? Can I tell you a bit about my disability and some of the reasonable adjustments that will help me to do my best in this role? And if you phrase it in a way like that and be prepared to go in and know what your reasonable adjustments are, that can lead to a conversation quite naturally, I find. But yeah, it does depend on the individual and the situation.
Someone put a supplementary question to that of saying, what if you're already in employment when you acquire a health condition or a disability? How do you go about it then?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I think the best course of action, depending on the size of the organisation and the nature of the job role, think about your closest superior, I suppose. So it might be that you have a line manager or a supervisor. Go to the person who you would typically go to kind of like the person who's one above you, I would say, and either send them an email or talk to them in person and just say, do you have some time? There's an issue that I want to talk about, and just get some time in the diary, get some proper time in the diary to talk about it. If you're comfortable doing so, I think it's really good to have these conversations in person rather than over email. But again, that depends on the circumstances. And again, think about what you're going to say in advance. So depending on how comfortable you are, and bearing in mind that you never have to disclose what your disability is, I actually found it helpful to explain a bit about my condition. I've been in this situation before where I've been in work and my line manager has changed. And if they don't know anything about your condition, especially if you have a condition like ME, it can be helpful to find ways of explaining a bit of background about the condition and how it affects you. So doing that, and then again, thinking about your needs in advance and any reasonable adjustments that might help you, because then you'll be able to go into that meeting and say, this is what I'm dealing with. It means I might struggle with this and this. So it would be helpful if I could have this and this. So it's like you're explaining the problem and then you're suggesting a solution and how they can support you. I find is the most proactive way of going about it, I suppose.
Thanks. And there is another question, and the people who are making questions, do feel free to come in, unmute yourself and ask follow-ups. But I was just thinking this might help Pippa to have looked at what the questions are. So there was one from a parent of a 17-year-old with autism, learning difficulties and communication difficulties. And I could identify with that of a family member who's 19 and in that situation. And the idea, and so she was asking, what is there out there for someone in that situation? And I would add in the idea that my family member would have confidence and be able to project himself. It would just be a non-starter for him. And so he is left with 4 A-levels stacking shelves in Tesco's, and the disability services at the job centre, I have to say, was pretty useless.
Yeah. Yeah, the disability services, I'm being careful what I say, but the disability services with job centres and DEWP centres, leave a lot to be desired, I find, a lot of the time. I won't pretend to be an expert in communication disorders because it's not my area of expertise. But in that situation, I think my best advice would be to go specifically to the charities. So like the autism and like the speech and language charities. A lot of them will have employment advisors who will be better equipped, and they'll have more niche tips, because I can completely like understand like the difficulty in really putting yourself forward. Even if you do have all of these valuable skills and experiences, like having the conversations can be the difficult part of it, and that in itself is a barrier where there should be reasonable adjustments. But I wouldn't want to give someone incorrect advice, so my best advice would be to go to the specific charities and see if they have employment advisors or one-to-one services they can offer.
Yeah. Thank you. There's various things coming into the chat with some very useful links. And I think that you said that you're going to be able to send the your slides round. And I wonder if it might be worth saving the chat as well and sending that round, because there are some good links and people might not be able to write them down very quickly.
Yeah, definitely. I'll find a way of doing that.
There's someone here saying that they're currently in part-time work, but their illness is getting worse. So being able to keep up the existing hours is just proving really difficult. But her experience is in hospitality. So how does she find work that she can do with in a completely new field?
Yeah. Oh, first of all, I'm so sorry, because that's a really difficult position to be in, especially at the moment. So my thoughts are with you. If it feels completely like inconceivable to stay in that line of work, I think it's important to remember that in trying something new, you're not going to be starting from scratch, because having worked in hospitality, especially alongside managing your condition, you're going to have picked up. I'm so conscious of sounding like really like giving really blanket advice and throwing the buzzwords in, but you're going to have picked up so many transferable skills that are relevant to so many other lines of work. And it will completely depend on what your interests are, but really think about the transferable skills you've picked up, write them down, make a list of them, and that in itself can set you up for applying for the new jobs that you've got your eye on. So I wish you all the best with it.
There's another one here about I think it'll be employment related benefits. So this is someone asking, do you or did you ever rely on help from the government on benefits while working in order to be able to live and work so that you're financially comfortable? And she says she hopes it's okay to ask you. I'm sure it is.
Absolutely. Again, the last thing I want to do is give people incorrect advice. So I'm very reluctant to advise specifically on benefits, because I think we all know here the system is not perfect. I've personally never been eligible for benefits. Like, we know how difficult the system is to navigate, and we know how many people are wrongly excluded. I'm just very fortunate that I can work enough hours to sustain like the cost of living. Off the top of my head, benefits like PIP aren't means tested. So in theory, it doesn't matter how much you're earning or how much income you have, you can still apply for benefits like PIP, whereas others are means tested. And it might be that there are limits on the amount of permitted work you can do. I'm trying to think of the best places to signpost you to for information on benefits. And I think Disability Rights UK have some really good resources. Scope's online community have benefits advisors and a helpline. And through Astrid, which is the charity I work for, without saying too much, we're doing what we can to support people who find themselves in that situation. So yeah, I don't want to give incorrect advice, but again, like, solidarity, because the benefit system is an absolute nightmare, to be honest.
And someone has suggested Citizens Advice, saying there's help on their website and they can do a benefits assessment as well. And I know that certainly in York and probably in all Citizens Advice, they have disability specialists
Yeah, definitely. Make them citizens advice offer really good services, so definitely make the most of them. And I have heard like the situation like isn't perfect, but I have heard people in York have had good experiences, so that's something at least.
Yeah, yeah. I think there is a good person in the York office, and I should say that the Employment Disability Services wasn't in York. I don't have any experience of the York office. There's another question here of someone saying that they have to complete placements as part of their university course, and the university isn't giving them much help with how to ask for reasonable adjustments or what reasonable adjustments could be put in place. And she's newly diagnosed with ME, and was wondering if you got any advice about that. Someone should be going into a clinical placement with a lot of standing.
Yeah, I know so many people in this position, and again, it seems so unfair, but often it's a case of pot luck with who you get as your supervisor and what placement you're assigned. Some people are more receptive to having conversations about reasonable adjustments, others make it a lot more difficult. To initiate the conversation, I think I would say don't be afraid to push. It doesn't have any impact, it won't have any impact on how they perceive you or how well you're going to do in your placement or how you're going to be marked. So don't have any fear of really going in there and saying, I'm looking forward to my placement, but I do need some reasonable adjustments to help me perform at my best. And then make a point of saying, this would be helpful, this would be helpful, and this would be helpful, and be prepared to back it up. That can be the best way of really making your point in that situation. And again, I really appreciate that it's so much easier said than done. And initiating that conversation can be the scariest part. And as for people who might be in that situation in the future or the next time you do placements, there's a really brilliant girl called Georgia Vine, and she is an OT student, and she is doing a lot of work around offering online placements. So I really recommend going and having a look at her work and the stuff she's doing. Um, and again, I do think the tides are turning with regard to making placements more accessible and realizing that a placement doesn't have to be very physical and in person in order to be a good representation of your skills. Um, and another good one as well, just while it's on my mind, my friend Charlotte is a speech and language therapist in training, and she talks a lot about how she makes her placements more accessible. So her handle is speechy at DMU. So it might be worth going and having a look at her work as well. But yeah, yeah, do your best to push for what you need, and don't be afraid in future situations to really advocate for the placements that are going to best suit you and your condition, because I know it's not easy being in that kind of environment with ME.
Hi, Pippa. Can we have her details, Charla and the OT?
Yeah, when I send everything around, I will
Yeah.
make sure that you have Charlotte and George's details as well. I'll write it
Please,
down.
thank you.
No
Thank you.
problem.
Can I also suggest to the person on placements, I don't know which university it is, but I was at the University of York for many years and had a lot of involvement in sorting out reasonable adjustments on placements. So do go to your disability services at whichever university you're at, and go to your students' union as well, because there absolutely should be reasonable adjustments made for placements.
And just while it's on my mind as well, a lot of specific subjects now have advocacy groups for disabled students, or a lot of universities have disabled students groups. So it might be that your disabled students union have contacts who have either been through it themselves, or they have like a bit of clout to really help you push for what you need.
And there's somebody put another link onto the chat as well. I think I might have got all the current questions, but apologies if I've missed anybody. If there's any of your questions that I've missed, please unmute yourself and ask.
Hi Pippa, I'm Jo Williams from the Educational Psychology Service in York. It's been great, it's been really informative, so thank you so much. I just wondered, just in response to Serna's sort of question about her son having got more complexity of need, having autism and communication difficulties and things, just to say that if anybody or anybody's relative has an education, health and care plan, they have a right to support in training and employment up until the age of 25, and they should really sort of be working with the school or the college or their education provider at least on an annual basis to review their plan, and the outcomes in that plan should be about preparation for adulthood. So hopefully, you know, at least on a yearly basis, but you know, often very much more than that, we should be having conversations with young people about what they want in the future, how we can support them, and they will have access to specialist careers advisors as well. So if you do have an education, health and care plan, or somebody you know, who's your relative does, then you know, go and approach your special educational needs coordinator in school or college and talk to them about your concerns around employment, and we should be able to get some specialist support for that. Thank you.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. I'm sure that'll be really helpful to the people who ask questions about that. That's brilliant. I'm going to make a note of that for the future as well. Yeah, I mean, if you do have any questions, feel free to carry on asking. I feel like I should do a plug as well while everyone's still here for the charity I work for, which is called Astrid. And I don't want to sound too promotional, but I just think what they're doing is so brilliant and so needed. So if you do have a long-term health condition and you're struggling to find work which matches not just your needs, but also your interests and your skills, we basically have an online platform which allows you to put your details out to employers, and employers come to us when they have flexible, inclusive jobs that they want to recruit for. And we're only a small charity, but we have more and more employers coming on month by month, and it's growing now and it's picking up. So it's a really good time just to get your details registered on there, even if you're not actively looking. So I'll send Astrid's details out as well. You're going to have a whole like pack of links and slides and all sorts at the end of this, but I hope it's helpful, and I'd rather you have the information than not have it.
And does Astrid work with people who have learning disabilities, autism, all of that, as well as physical conditions?
I'm not entirely sure. Their specialism is very much long-term, like fluctuating chronic illnesses. That's what the founders, that was the founders' reason for starting it. But I'm pretty sure if you went to them, because everybody who signs up has like one-to-one contact with an advisor. So I think if you ask the question, I think they'd definitely be receptive to it, even if it's just putting you in touch with someone else who might be better equipped to help. So don't hesitate in coming forwards.
Thank you. And there's another question come in. Well, one saying, does your organisation provide work experience? That would be Astrid, I would think. And another one saying, would you recommend being employed rather than self-employed?
Okay, Astrid, I suppose it does offer work experience. We offer volunteering as well as employment. So if you're looking for maybe an internship or work experience, again, if you communicate that, like they're a good bunch, I'm pretty sure they'll go out of their way to help you find what you're looking for. I also have a blog post, I'm going to write this down so I don't forget. I have a blog post on finding inclusive volunteering opportunities, so I'll send that round as well. Because I appreciate work experience and internships can be difficult to land as well. As for being employed rather than self-employed, it's so difficult because there are pros and cons to each, and I really think it depends on your circumstances. So with employment, you might have access to more traditional lines of support more easily. You might be able to access reasonable adjustments more easily and workplace support, but you might not have the flexibility you need to really accommodate your condition. And that's something that I found as well. So with my particular condition, I find it a lot easier to work in a self-employed capacity where I have complete control over my day. But with self-employment, there are a lot of drawbacks. So like managing your finances in a self-employed capacity, you might not have access as easily to various support services, although access to work is another one to look into, whether you're employed or self-employed. So I think really consider the pros and cons of each. And that's something I was actually thinking about doing a blog post on. So thank you for that. It's given me the push I needed. I'll do a blog post on that.
Thank you. And this might need to be the last one. And it's going back to something that maybe to say a little bit more. Oh, sorry. Disclose your disability on your CV or cover letter.
Oh, I think my internet went slightly there, but I think I got the gist of that. Disclosing your disability on your CV or cover letter. I think if you can tie it in, like, think about where it feels natural to say it. So like, I'm imagining if it was me, I would say something along the lines of, I'm really interested in this line of work, and due to my own lived experiences of having a chronic illness, I've found that I have a particular empathy for this and this and this, or because of my disability, I have a particular interest in this, and this is how I've demonstrated it. Like, my disability means that I'm equipped in overcoming challenges or communicating certain things. So just think about how where it fits most naturally and how you can use it to demonstrate a positive that shows your employability.
Yeah, thank you. And there is a question that has come in, but I think that it might be something that would be best dealt with directly with you, because it's a very specific advice about how you set up small online shops within a website like you have for your ebooks.
Yeah, I know Sakara, so we can have a conversation about that another time. That's another really good point. So we can go away and have a chat about that, definitely.
Okay. And I know you've been recording it, so I think that you will be looking at how to make it available. Because I think that there were some people who weren't able to make it to this live session, but might be very interested in doing a listen again, and maybe some of the people on today would find it useful to listen again. So we'll keep in touch with you from York Disability Week over that. We are having a section on our website where we're going to try and list all the things that would be available to be watched again. And anyway, I know you're going to be circulating to the people that have registered here. So there are lots of thank yous and appreciation. I think that it's been a very valuable session. There's and somebody here now looking forward to the blog post. Really interesting, informative session. There's lots coming in. You'll be able to look at them afterwards, Pippa, and have a cup of tea and relax now that you've done it. I think that it's been great. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot and I found it very helpful.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for the opportunity as well. Like, thank you for helping facilitate this with the captions and the BSL in particular. And thank you all for coming.
Yeah, and we should say, shouldn't we? Thank you. Thanks to Susie for captions and to Charlotte for BSL.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Do have a look at the rest of the week's programme, see if there's anything else that you're interested in. There's some really good stuff happening. But thank you especially to Pippa. Most people have got their videos off, so I'll have to clap on their behalf.
I'd curtsy if I could, but I'm a bit tired, so we'll give that a miss. Brilliant. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.